Today we are covering the sequel to the ever-controversial film Mandingo. Although you don't need to watch my recap of that one to understand this. This one occurs 15 years after Mandingo, and for some reason has similar names and actors, but not quite related. It got the beautiful Brenda Sykes and Pam Grier though. The movie begins with a shipment of slaves arriving at a port in Havana, Cuba, set in the 19th century. They march toward Havana's slave market, where they will be sold to wealthy Cuban landowners to tend to sugar and tobacco fields and breed more slaves. The strongest are handpicked from the best tribes to create a new set of slaves. One renowned breeder is Tambora, an enslaved African king who has developed a forbidden alliance with Doña Mariana, his owner's mistress. Black male slaves were forbidden to copulate with white women, and by doing so, Tambora is captured and executed. This brings great distress to Doña Mariana, as she is pregnant with Tambora's child. She weeps in her grief with Rachel, her personal female slave, whom she scissors with from time to time. They flee to New Orleans, where Mariana gives birth to her baby, Drum, who was named after the Academy Award-winning film Drumline. Rachel raises the child as her own, and Mariana becomes the most celebrated OnlyFans producer in New Orleans. By 1860, a new breed of slavers arrives, and although more civilized nations have condemned the slave trade, slavers find ways around this by speed breeding their slaves and selling them to cotton plantations. At a lavish kinky party, Drum carries a tray through a crowd of guests. Bernard de Marigny, an aristocrat, eyes Drum. Why Bernard looking like the berries and cream guy? He announces a match between the slaves to the crowd and motions them to the courtyard. He asks Mariana to allow Drum to fight, but she refuses. He threatens to destroy her entire business and reputation, leaving her with no choice but to submit. The fight begins, and Drum is quickly overpowered by his opponent, Blaze. He is knocked down several times but ultimately emerges victorious. This like the Ken Norton versus Muhammad Ali rivalry. Mariana and Bernard are pleased. As a reward, Bernard gives Blaze to Drum and asks what else he desires. Drum requests a woman of his own, and Bernard grants his wish. Afterward, Drum helps Blaze to his feet and tells him he will be staying with him at Mariana's. A group of female slaves arrives for Drum to choose from. Among them is Kalinda, a feisty young woman. When Drum selects her, she resists, writhing in defiance. He reassures her, promising to love her more than any white master ever could. His words calm her, and he confirms his choice. Later that evening, Drum and Kalinda are in the bedroom, preparing to be intimate. As they undress, Kalinda shares her experiences in the slave trade and reveals that she has never been with a man before. Just as they lie in bed, Bernard suddenly enters with his fugly bangs and demands to join them, claiming it is time for Drum to bang him. Drum and Kalinda resist, and in the heat of the moment, Drum strikes Bernard, making his nose bleed. Enraged, Bernard threatens to make Drum suffer a slow and painful death before storming out. Meanwhile, Mariana and Hammond are in the bedroom. Hammond speaks to her about finding a woman to care for his daughter. He also expresses interest in purchasing Drum to use as a breeder on his farm. Just note that this did actually happen in antebellum South. Slave owners forced slaves to have children to increase their own wealth. Later, Mariana and Rachel are together in the bedroom, reminiscing about watching Drum grow up and how Rachel cared for him as if he were her own. Their conversation turns intimate, and they share smallpox. The next morning, Rachel looks out the window and sees Drum and Blaze training in the yard. Concerned, she goes outside to scold Drum, disapproving of his fighting. Bernard and his men arrive. He challenges Drum to a fight against one of his strongest men. The fight is unfair. Drum is unarmed while his opponent, Babouin, wields a knife. Babouin slashes Drum's chest, but Drum manages to land a few punches and kicks. They are evenly matched and the fight drags on. Growing impatient, Bernard orders his men to restrain Drum. Just as Babouin is about to stab him, Rachel leaps onto Babouin. Bernard immediately shoots her. His men flee and Blaze knocks Babouin down. Drum rushes to strangle Bernard, but Blaze stops him, warning that killing a white man will cost him his life. Bernard seizes the moment and escapes on horseback. Drum then turns to Rachel, calling out, "Mama!" With her last breath, Rachel weakly utters, "Mariana," trying to reveal the truth before she dies. At Rachel's burial, Drum and Mariana stand by her grave. Mariana tells him he can't stay in New Orleans any longer. She warns that no one will take the word of a black man over a mayonnaise and reminds him that he will always be seen as a slave. That evening, Mariana calls Drum into her bedroom. She hands him a tribal necklace, saying it belonged to his father. She begins to tell him about his father, that he was a tribe king, and how much he looked just like him. She starts to kiss him, but as she gets closer, she suddenly stops herself. She then orders him to leave. "Miss Girl, you was about to kiss your own son. Leave that inbred white shit out of the gene pool." The next day, Hammond is gambling with masters and their women. Mariana approaches and tells him she has good news. She has decided to sell Drum to him, under the condition that he also buys Blaze. Hammond agrees but refuses if a woman is involved, for this will complicate things as he intends to use them for breeding. Mariana also tells him she has found a woman for him and introduces Augusta. Augusta sure is happy to get her back broken by Hammond. As Drum prepares to leave, Kalinda helps him pack. She pleads with him to stay, knowing she may never see him again. When he refuses to stay, she is left behind, crying in despair. Before departing, Hammond introduces Augusta to Regine, a personal servant he has purchased for her. Regine realizes she was also purchased for Hammond's pleasure, and she looking like her Jackie Brown side finna come out. They leave for Falconhurst Plantation, Hammond's estate. Upon arrival, Augusta admires the property and meets Lucretia, the female slave who raised Hammond. The casting of Lucretia is just disrespectful AF. Later, she calls for Drum and complains about the house being messy, ordering him to inform Regine to start cleaning. "Miss Augusta, girl, your lazy, unemployed ass should clean it up." Under Augusta's supervision, the servants begin cleaning the estate. Hammond later enters with his daughter Sophie, who apparently into black men. Hammond tells her to shut her mouth. He introduces Sophie to Augusta, but Augusta is taken aback by Sophie's crude manner of speech. Sophie overhears poking Drum's butt, so he skips away. Augusta expresses concerns about Hammond's relationship with Regine, but he dismisses her and warns her not to interfere. Hammond tells Blaze and Drum to leave and get to breeding so as to annoy Augusta even more. The next morning, Hammond is in bed with Regine when Augusta barges in and serves them breakfast. Annoyed by her intrusion, Hammond warns that if she continues this behavior, he will no longer be able to sleep with Regine. Amused, Augusta resolves to keep doing it to stop him, saying her pastrami is good too. Later, Hammond teaches Drum how to properly ride a horse and is pleased with his progress. He then instructs Drum to oversee the whippings of other slaves, but Drum refuses. Hammond explains that to be his best boy, Drum must take on such responsibilities and not let his desires lead him to bad decisions. Meanwhile, while Drum is cleaning Hammond's gun collection, Sophie sneaks up on him and tries to seduce him. When he refuses, she threatens to falsely accuse him of grape. "I just know this girl smells like her bedside chamber pot." Before things escalate, Lucretia enters and puts a stop to it. Concerned, Drum also asks Blaze if he has ever been with Sophie, but Blaze denies it. While inspecting the estate, Hammond praises Drum for his work. However, Drum soon catches Sophie sneaking into the stable, following Blaze. She tries to force herself on him, but he resists, knowing it could get him killed. Drum intervenes, warning her to leave Blaze alone. Furious, she storms off. Drum later confronts Blaze, and an argument turns into a fistfight. "Blaze, Drum done saved your ass and you acting up." Lucretia breaks them apart using her broom. To prevent Hammond from noticing Blaze's bruises and punishing him, Lucretia orders the other slaves to keep him hidden for a few days. Lucretia also advises Drum to hide his black eye, for if their master finds out, they will be severely punished. That night, Regine bathes Augusta. Afterward, Augusta asks Regine if she would rather be with Drum than with Hammond. Regine remains silent. Later, as she prepares to sleep with Hammond, she tries to persuade him of Augusta's beauty and desirability, trying to get the U-shaped hairline man off her. The next day, during a meal, Sophie suddenly points out Drum's black eye to Hammond. Suspecting a fight, Hammond demands to know what happened, but Drum denies it. Unconvinced, Hammond orders all male slaves to line up outside for inspection. Noticing Blaze's absence, he inquires about him. A slave reveals Blaze is in the kitchen. Hammond confronts Blaze but gets no response. Drum tries to cover for him, but Hammond sees through the lie. He orders 5 lashes for Drum and 30 for Blaze. As they are whipped, Sophie's nympho ass goes to take a peek but gets yelled at. Then Hammond feels a pang of guilt and cuts the punishment short. "Turn that pang of guilt into setting your slaves free, you pruny fig." Lucretia offers them water afterward. Drum tries to give some to Blaze, but he angrily knocks it away. Frustrated, Blaze declares he is running away to the north. Lucretia warns him about the dangers of road patrols and their awful ways of torture. Later, as Hammond, Augusta, and Sophie have tea outside, Hammond tells Drum he plans to breed him with Regine. Augusta is disgusted by Hammond's crude language, which leads to an argument. Augusta says she a white woman, not a slave, so he can't talk to her like that. But he yells back at her to put her in her place. Realizing her vote for Trump also represses white women, Augusta runs to her room in tears. Hammond follows to apologize, and Augusta confesses that she is still a virgin. Bitch, you like a 40-year-old virgin. They reconcile, and when they return, they announce their engagement to Sophie. Sophie is outraged. To punish Sophie for her misbehavior, they decide to send her to Pentecost school. In retaliation, Sophie lies and claims Blaze made advances on her. She lies in detail how she held Blaze's private parts and how it felt good. Enraged, Hammond chains Blaze. Later, Sophie taunts Blaze, lifting her skirt to expose her hairy butthole. Hammond catches her and, realizing she was lying, beats her. However, he still does not release Blaze. On the night of Hammond and Augusta's engagement party, guests gather to celebrate. Mariana embraces Augusta, sharing in her joy. Bernard arrives and is immediately irritated by Drum's presence. Over dinner, guests discuss the slave trade. One asks if Drum is for sale, but Hammond refuses. However, he offers an alternative, a troublesome slave he wants to see hanged, Blaze. Bernard suggests castration instead. Shocked, Mariana raises a toast to the castration of all men, leaving the guests gagged and the dinner awkward. That's a queen right there. Later, Hammond meets a slave trader, Montgomery, and arranges to have Blaze taken away in the morning. That night, Blaze learns about Montgomery's horrible reputation and convinces Drum to help him escape. Drum breaks his chains and Blaze frees the other slaves, planning a revolt. The rebellion begins. The slaves first kill Hammond's house staff and then Montgomery. As they hack him with blades, they knock down his bedside candle and set the mansion on fire. Meanwhile, Regine and Drum were trying to get it on. They see the fire from out the window and they run down to raise the alarm. Lucretia warns Hammond of the revolt. "Miss Girl, you should have been running to Harriet Tubman, but we all know why you didn't." Hammond and the other whites barricade themselves inside. Armed, they prepare to fight. As the slaves attack, Blaze orders them to burn the house down and kill anyone who flees. Drum pleads with Hammond to negotiate, but Bernard convinces Hammond not to negotiate. Drum then tries to reason with Blaze, but Bernard shoots Blaze dead. Enraged, Drum charges at Bernard, knocking Hammond aside. Bernard attempts to shoot him, but Drum overpowers the bottom bitch and rips his balls off. There wasn't much there to begin with. The slaves storm the house, killing the remaining white men, and they even got the women stealing some guns. Mariana is shot and dies in Drum's arms. Outside, Regine is shot by a slave. Sometimes same-skin folks ain't kinfolk. Then Augusta is assaulted, but Drum rescues her. Carrying an injured Regine, Drum, Hammond, and Augusta hide in the barn. A group of white riders arrives and fires on the rebelling slaves. Hammond urges Drum to escape. Augusta begs Hammond to vouch for Drum's loyalty, but he refuses. If Drum stays, he will be killed. As the battle rages on, the mansion explodes in flames. At last, Hammond yells at Drum to run. Drum has the chance to shoot him dead, but he runs away instead, vanishing into the dark night. Hammond says black people are unpredictable. Sometimes they act human, and sometimes they're so bloodthirsty after tasting blood. Okay. Hammond having the face that would make onions cry. Sadly, I didn't see Sophie die at the end. I think she was already gone at boarding school, and they really needed to kill off Augusta and Hammond, because why the hell did Drum spare them? What are y'all's thoughts on this one? Very controversial film, and it felt like a comedy at times because of the terrible dialogue.
Subscribe to watch more videos like this. Turn on notifications. And leave a like, it really helps the channel out. Thank you for watching.